Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Today we're going to be, we're going deep as always, but this time into the world of aliens and UFOs. You know,
Really getting into it, yeah.
all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And to kind of guide us on this journey, we're using episode 5 of the OAI podcast
Nice.
by Dauntless as our jumping off point. It's really interesting stuff. So it kind of goes from like the real science of looking for aliens all the way to like some of the really out there theories.
Yeah, I think that's what I find so fascinating about this topic. You know, you have that real scientific foundation, but then it very quickly kind of bleeds into the unknown and the unexplained.
Right. And like you said,
Yeah,
there's like real science, happened like with SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence.
Right, they're out there with their big, dishes pointed at the sky, listening for any little signal, any little peep from ET.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So they're really looking, but like most scientists aren't really expecting to find like full-blown civilizations right away.
No, not really. I mean, it's statistically so much more likely that if we do find something out there, it's going to be microbial life. Tiny little bacteria or something.
Right. It makes sense because even here on Earth, like that's how life started, just these teeny tiny little single-celled organisms.
Yeah, and it took billions of years for things to evolve into, complex life as we know it.
So finding even a little microbe on another planet would be huge.
Absolutely, it would completely change our understanding of life in the universe.
Yeah, it would. And there are actually a few places, even in our own solar system, that scientists think could potentially have these tiny little alien microbes.
Oh, really? Like where?
Well, like Mars is a big one.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And then also some of the icy moons of Jupiter and Saturn, like Europa and Enceladus. They think they have these like subsurface oceans that could be teeming with microscopic life.
Whoa, so there could be little alien fishies swimming around under the ice.
Maybe not 50s, but definitely maybe microbes. It's fascinating.
That is really cool. Now, I know the podcast also talks about the Drake equation, which I guess tries to estimate the number of intelligent civilizations out there.
Right, but it sounds super complicated.
It is. It uses all these different factors that we don't really have solid answers for yet. Like how many stars are born each year, how many of those stars have planets, and then out of those planets, how many actually develop life, and then even further, how many of those life-bearing planets develop intelligent life that can communicate.
Right, so it's almost like more of a thought experiment than a hard and fast equation.
Exactly. It helps us think about all the different things that have to line up for intelligent life to exist, but we can't really plug in solid numbers and get a definitive answer.
So it's kind of like a cosmic guessing game in a way.
Yeah, you could say that. But even if it's just a guess, it's still pretty mind-blowing to think about how many other civilizations might be out there.
Okay, so we've got scientists searching for microbes and using equations to ponder the possibility of intelligent life. But what about all those stories we hear about UFOs? Or as they're calling them now, UAPs.
Unidentified aerial phenomena, right? There seems to have been a real shift in the way people are talking about them. It's not just fringe stuff anymore. Even governments and the military are taking it more seriously.
Yeah, and I think those videos the Pentagon released a few years ago of Navy pilots encountering those strange objects in the sky really kind of changed the conversation.
They did. It kind of forced people to at least acknowledge that there are things out there that we can't easily explain.
Right, and then there's that U.S. government report from 2021 that actually admitted that some UAPs defy explanation. They just don't know what they are.
Yeah, and that's a pretty big deal for a government to admit they don't have all the answers.
Huge.
Right?
But does that mean they're aliens?
Not necessarily. There could be other explanations, like some kind of super advanced technology that we haven't developed yet, or even some natural phenomenon that we just don't understand.
Okay, so it's still a mystery.
Yeah.
But it's cool that they're at least acknowledging that there are things out there that they can't explain.
Definitely. It opens the door to some really interesting possibilities.
Right. And speaking of possibilities, the podcast spends a lot of time talking about different ways of defining alien intelligence. Like they mentioned EBEs and NHIs.
Ah, yes, the acronyms.
So what do those even stand for?
So EBEs are extraterrestrial biological entities. Basically the kind of aliens we typically picture, with bodies and stuff.
Okay, got it. So like the little green men or the grays or whatever.
Exactly. And then NHIs are non-human intelligences, which is a much broader category. That includes any intelligence that didn't originate on Earth. So it could be extraterrestrial, but it could also be something else entirely.
Something else. Like what?
Well, they mentioned interdimensional beings, for example.
Okay, whoa, that's getting kind of trippy.
Right, or even non-human AI.
Non-human AI. So like artificial intelligence that wasn't created by humans.
Exactly. Imagine a civilization that's so advanced that they've created AI that's way beyond anything we can even conceive of.
That's kind of freaky, but also really cool.
It is. It really makes you question our whole definition of intelligence and where it might come from.
Right, like maybe we're not the only game in town when it comes to intelligence.
Exactly. And maybe the forms of intelligence out there are so different from ours that we wouldn't even recognize them as intelligent.
That's a mind-blowing thought.
Yeah.
All right, so we've covered the scientific search for life, unexplained phenomena, and different ways of defining alien intelligence. But the podcast also talks about the cultural impact of aliens, right? Like how they show up in movies and TV shows and all that.
Oh, yeah. Aliens are everywhere in pop culture. It's hard to imagine science fiction without them.
And it's interesting to think about how those portrayals shape our own ideas about what aliens might be like.
Absolutely. Like, for example, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. That movie gave us this very specific image of benevolent aliens trying to communicate with us.
Right. Or E.T. with that adorable little alien who just wanted to go home.
And then you have movies like Alien that present a much darker and more terrifying view of extraterrestrial life.
Right. So depending on what you watch, you might come away with a very different idea of what to expect if we ever do make contact.
Exactly. And the thing is, all of these portrayals, whether they're friendly or scary, they're based on our own fears and hopes and imaginations. There's no real evidence to support any of them.
It's all speculation, but that doesn't make it any less fun to think about.
Of course not. Speculation is what fuels our curiosity and keeps us searching for answers.
All right, so I think we've laid the groundwork. Now let's get to the fun part, the alien types.
Ah, yes, the menagerie of extraterrestrial possibilities.
I'm ready. Where do we start?
Well, I think we have to start with the classics, the Greys.
The Greys, yeah, those little gray-skinned dudes with the big black eyes.
Exactly. They're the stars of countless abduction stories, and they're often associated with genetic experiments and advanced technology.
Right, like they're always poking and prodding people and taking samples and stuff.
That's the image we often see. And the podcast mentions that they're supposedly from the Zeta Reticuli star system, which is about 39 light years away.
39 light years. That's a long way to come for a little probing.
It is. It makes you wonder how they even travel such vast distances. Some theories suggest they might have warp drive technology or use wormholes to bend space-time.
Wormholes. Like something straight out of Star Trek.
Exactly. The possibilities are pretty mind-boggling when you start thinking about interstellar travel.
So besides the Greys, what other types of aliens are out there?
Well, the podcast also mentions hybrids, which are supposedly a mix of human and gray DNA.
Wait a minute, so we could have alien-human hybrids walking among us?
It's a possibility, though, a pretty unsettling one.
It is kind of creepy. But what about those tall white aliens that people sometimes report seeing?
Those are often called the tall whites, and they're described as being humanoid with blonde hair and pale skin.
And sometimes people say they have secret agreements with governments or something.
Yeah, that's one of the theories. Maybe they're working behind the scenes, influencing events or sharing technology.
That's a bit of a conspiracy theory, but it's definitely interesting to think about.
And then we have the Nordics, sometimes called the Pleiadians. They're often described as tall and beautiful with blonde hair and blue eyes.
So basically like the supermodels of the alien world.
Yeah, kind of. They're often associated with spiritual messages and guidance.
And maybe they're like the wise elders of the galaxy.
It's a possibility. They're definitely seen as more benevolent than some of the other races, like the reptilians.
Oh yeah, the reptilians. Those are the ones that conspiracy theorists say are secretly controlling our governments, right?
That's one theory. The reptilians are often depicted as having humanoid bodies, but with reptilian features like scales, claws, and slit-like eyes.
Okay, that's officially creepy. What about aliens that are less well humanoid?
The podcast mentions the mantis beings, which are described as insectoid, like praying mantises, but with high intelligence and a spiritual nature.
So giant, wise praying mantises from space. I'm trying to picture that.
It is a pretty wild image. And then there are the avian or blue-feathered humanoids who are often linked to ancient civilizations like the Egyptians or the Mayans.
I can see them, these majestic blue-feathered beings teaching our ancestors about astronomy and stuff.
It's a cool idea, right? And it ties into those ancient astronaut theories that we'll probably talk about later.
Okay, so we've got greys, reptilians, mantis beings, bird people. Is there anything else?
The podcast also mentions the Lyrans, who are said to be the ancestors of many humanoid races, including humans. They're described as having cat-like features.
Cat people from space. Now that's a new one.
And finally, we have the non-physical beings entities that exist outside of our normal understanding of physical reality.
So like ghosts or spirits?
In a way, yes. They're often described as energy-based or interdimensional.
So they're not bound by the same laws of physics as we are.
Exactly, which makes them very difficult to study or even detect.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. There's a lot to take in.
I know, right? But it's all part of the fun of exploring the alien question. You never know what kind of strange and wonderful possibilities you'll encounter.
That's for sure. And speaking of possibilities, before we get too deep into all the different alien types, let's take a quick break to remind everyone about the source material for this deep dive.
Oh, yeah. Good idea. So as we mentioned earlier, we're using episode 5 of the OOAI podcast by Dauntless as our guide for this exploration.
And if you're really digging this alien stuff, you should definitely check out the full episode. It's got even more fascinating info than we can cover here.
Absolutely. And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe to Dauntless's YouTube channel. They've got tons of great content on all sorts of interesting topics.
Okay, so now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's get back to our alien deep dive. Where were we?
We were just about to delve into some of the more esoteric alien races. The podcast starts with the Anunnaki.
The Anunnaki. Aren't those the ones from ancient Sumerian texts? The ones who are sometimes interpreted as like ancient astronauts?
Exactly, that's right.
Okay, so fill me in. What's the deal with the Anunnaki?
Well, in Sumerian mythology, the Anunnaki are these powerful deities who came down from the heavens.
But they were like gods.
In a way, yes. And some people believe they were actually extraterrestrials who visited Earth in the distant past.
Like ancient aliens building the pyramids and stuff?
Well, that's one interpretation. Some people believe they might have played a role in the development of human civilization, maybe even genetically engineering us.
Whoa, that's wild. So are we talking alien gods or alien scientists or what?
It's hard to say for sure. The Sumerian texts are pretty vague and open to interpretation, but it's definitely a fascinating theory.
It is. I mean, it would completely rewrite history if it were true.
Right, it would challenge everything we think we know about our origins.
Okay, so we've got the Anunnaki, ancient astronauts potentially meddling in human affairs. What other esoteric races do they talk about?
Well, they mention the Arcturians, who are said to be from the star Arcturus.
Arcturus. Is that a real star?
It is. It's a red giant star in the constellation Bootes.
Okay, cool. And what are these Arcturians like?
They're often described as being very advanced both spiritually and technologically.
So like the wise and benevolent aliens?
Kind of. They're often associated with healing, spiritual growth, and advanced consciousness.
So maybe they're like the cosmic healers of the galaxy.
It's a cool thought, right? Maybe they're out there helping other civilizations evolve and reach their full potential.
Okay, that's a nice change of pace from the reptilians. What else is there?
The podcast also mentions the Sirians, who are associated with the Sirius star system.
Sirius? Isn't that the brightest star in the sky?
It is. It's actually a binary star system with 2 stars, Sirius A and Sirius B.
Wow, so these Sirians come from a double star system. That's awesome. What are they like?
They're often linked to ancient Egypt, with some theories suggesting they might have influenced Egyptian culture and knowledge.
So like the ancient Egyptians were hanging out with aliens?
That's one theory. There are definitely some interesting parallels between certain Egyptian myths and symbols and the idea of extraterrestrial contact.
Okay, this is really making me question everything I thought I knew about history.
That's the thing about this topic. It can really challenge your assumptions and make you look at the world in a whole new way.
I'm definitely feeling that. Any other races we should know about?
They wrap up this section with a discussion of the Orion beings who are said to come from the Orion constellation.
Orion. I know that one. It's got that belt of 3 stars.
Right, and according to some theories, the Orion beings are a diverse group, with some being benevolent and others being malevolent.
So like any civilization, there are good guys and bad guys.
Exactly. And there are theories about Orion beings being involved in galactic conflicts or even influencing events here on Earth.
Okay, so we've got ancient astronauts, cosmic healers, Egyptian influencers, and galactic warriors. That's quite a lineup.
It is, and it reflects the vastness of the alien question. There are so many different theories and possibilities out there.
And speaking of possibilities, the podcast mentions a particularly unusual description of an alien that doesn't fit neatly into any of these categories. What was it again?
They describe it as a humanoid, tall, with a triangular head and spaghetti-like limbs.
Spaghetti-like limbs. Okay, that's unique.
Yeah.
What do they make of that?
They explore a few possibilities. They say it could be a variation of the mantis beings with their elongated limbs, or maybe an unusual type of tall white.
Would have had insectoid races in general. Could it be one of those?
They consider that possibility, too. They point out that insectoid beings are often associated with advanced intelligence and a role in galactic councils or federations.
Councils? Like some kind of intergalactic United Nations.
Exactly. They suggest This being with its unusual appearance might be a representative from a galactic federation or council of worlds?
So picture this, a council chamber filled with Greys, reptilians, Nordics,
Yeah.
and being with a triangle head and spaghetti limbs, all debating the fate of the galaxy.
Now that's a sight I'd like to see.
It's a pretty wild image, for sure. And the podcast actually goes on to explore this idea of a galactic federation in more detail.
Yeah, they talk about it quite a bit. It's a pretty common concept in UFO lore.
So what exactly is this galactic federation supposed to be, and what's the role in all this?
Well, it's often depicted as a coalition of advanced civilizations, kind of like a cosmic United Nations, but with a much grander purpose. They're said to be involved in overseeing the development of younger species, maintaining peace in the galaxy, and guiding the evolution of consciousness.
So like cosmic babysitters, making sure we don't blow ourselves up.
In a way, yes. The podcast mentions that they supposedly adhere to a non-interference policy, allowing civilizations to develop at their own pace. But they might intervene if things get too out of hand.
Okay, but if they're so advanced and they care so much about peace, why don't they just, show up and help us solve all our problems?
That's a question that a lot of people have, and the podcast explores several possible explanations.
Like what?
Well, one idea is that they have this kind of prime directive, like in Star Trek, where they avoid interfering with less developed civilizations to allow them to evolve naturally.
So basically they're letting us learn our lessons the hard way.
Maybe. Another explanation is the idea of free will. They might believe that openly intervening would violate our right to make our own choices, even if those choices are sometimes not so great.
Okay, I can see that.
Yeah.
But what about subtle guidance? Couldn't they nudge us in the right direction without taking away our free will?
That's another possibility that they explore. Some people believe the Federation might be influencing events behind the scenes, maybe through channeling dreams or even covert interactions with governments.
Ooh, conspiracy theory alert.
Ah!
But seriously, if they're out there watching us, wouldn't it make sense for them to try to guide us towards a better future?
It's definitely a compelling thought. The podcast also mentions the possibility that they might be gradually sharing advanced knowledge and technology with us, but only as we become ready to handle it responsibly.
So like a cosmic test. Prove we're not going to nuke ourselves, and then they'll share the good stuff.
Something like that. But they also delve into some more spiritual explanations.
What's
Well, one idea is that Earth is kind of a school where souls come to learn difficult lessons, and the Federation respects that process, even if it means we have to go through some tough times.
like cosmic karma? We got to earn our enlightenment the hard way.
Exactly. And another idea is that they're waiting for humanity to reach a certain level of spiritual awakening before making open contact.
So they're waiting for us to get our act together. Good luck with that. But seriously, if they are observing us, how would they even know what's going on down here?
That's a great question, and it leads us to another fascinating concept explored in the podcast: remote viewing.
Ooh, ESP and aliens. This is going to be good. Tell me everything.
Well, the podcast explains that remote viewing is basically the practice of using extrasensory perception, or ESP, to gather information about distant or unseen targets.
So like psychic spying.
You could say that. And some people claim to use remote viewing to access information about extraterrestrial civilizations, including the Galactic Federation.
So they're tuning into the galactic frequency and getting intel on the Federation. What kind of intel are they getting?
Some remote viewers describe seeing the structure of the Galactic Federation, claiming it's a vast and organized coalition with a hierarchy and specific roles for different alien races. They've also reported seeing details about their technology, like faster-than-light travel energy weapons and even consciousness-based communication. Some even describe seeing massive city-like spacecraft and hidden bases on Earth and other planets.
Oh, wow. So they're not just getting vague impressions, they're seeing the nuts and bolts of this alleged Federation. That's amazing if it's true. But how do we know if any of this is accurate?
That's the tricky part with remote viewing. It's very subjective and difficult to verify. There's no scientific evidence to back up the claims, and skeptics argue that it's more likely a product of imagination or cultural influences.
So it's hard to know what to believe. But the idea that someone could psychically spy on an alien civilization is pretty mind-blowing.
It is, and it shows how this topic really pushes the boundaries of what we consider possible.
Right. It makes you wonder what other secrets are out there just waiting to be discovered.
And maybe someday we'll have the technology or the psychic abilities to unlock those secrets.
Until then, the mystery continues. Now, the podcast episode also delves into some famous alien abduction and encounter cases. Want to hear about those?
Absolutely. Let's start with one of the most well-known, the Betty and Barney Hill abduction, which happened back in 1961.
Oh yeah, that one's a classic. Refresh my memory. What happened again?
So Betty and Barney Hill were driving through the White Mountains in New Hampshire when they claimed to have encountered a UFO.
And then what?
They said they experienced missing time, and under hypnosis, they recalled being taken aboard the craft and examined by small, gray-skinned beings.
The classic grays. So they're the stars of this abduction story.
They are, and interestingly enough, Betty even drew a star map that she claimed the alien showed her, which some people believe points to the Zeta Reticuli star system as their home.
Wow, so maybe the grays really are from Zeta Reticuli. That's pretty far out.
It is. It's one of the most iconic alien abduction cases, and it continues to fascinate people to this day.
It's amazing how these stories, even though they happened decades ago, still have such a hold on our imaginations.
They do. They tap into something deep within us, our fascination with the unknown and our desire to understand our place in the universe.
Right. Even if they're not true, they still make us think and wonder. What about some other famous abductions?
Well, there's the Travis Walton abduction, which happened in 1975.
Oh, yeah, I think I've heard of that one. What happened?
Travis was working with a logging crew in Arizona when they allegedly saw a UFO. He approached the craft and was supposedly struck by a beam of light, and then he disappeared.
He just vanished.
For 5 days?
5 days? That's a long time to be missing. What happened to him?
When he returned, he claimed to have been aboard a spacecraft where he encountered both grays and more humanoid beings.
So 2 different types of aliens. That's interesting. His story must have been pretty convincing.
It was. It was even adapted into the film Fire in the Sky.
Oh yeah, I've seen that one. It's pretty intense. What about some cases that don't involve the grays?
Well, there's the Pascagoula abduction, which took place in 1973.
Okay, I don't think I've heard of that one. What happened?
2 men, Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker, were fishing in Mississippi when they said they were taken aboard a UFO by strange beings. But instead of the grays, they described the beings as reptilian with wrinkled grayish skin claw-like hands and slits for mouths.
Reptilian aliens. Yeah. Now that's creepy. It's like something out of a horror movie.
It is. And what's interesting about this case is that both witnesses were considered to be very credible. They were both hardworking family men with no history of mental illness or drug use.
So it wasn't like they were just making stuff up for attention.
It doesn't seem like it. They both stuck to their story even under intense scrutiny.
That's pretty wild. Okay, so we've got grays, humanoids, and reptilians. What other kinds of aliens are people seeing out there?
Well, the podcast also talks about some intriguing cases from outside the United States, like, for example, the aerial school encounter in Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe. Okay, I've never heard of this one. What happened?
In 1994, over 60 school children at the aerial school reported seeing a UFO land near their playground. They said several beings with large eyes descended from the craft and communicated with them telepathically.
Telepathically. Whoa, that's crazy. What did the beings say?
They reportedly gave the children warnings about environmental destruction and the future of humanity.
So like a message of caution from beyond the stars.
You could say that. It's a very interesting case because of the large number of witnesses involved and the consistency of their accounts.
Right. It's hard to dismiss the testimony of 60 children, especially when they all tell the same story.
Exactly. It adds a certain level of credibility to the event.
What other cases do they mention?
Well, they briefly touch on a few others, like the Allagash abductions in Maine, the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter in Kentucky, the Antonio Vilas Boas abduction in Brazil, the Rendlesham Forest incident in England, Whitley Strieber's encounters with strange beings, and the Varginha UFO incident in Brazil.
Wow, it's a lot of encounters. It seems like these things are happening all over the world.
They are. And it makes you wonder if there's a pattern or a connection between these events.
Right, like maybe it's all part of some larger phenomenon that we're just starting to glimpse.
It's definitely a possibility. And as we explore more of these cases, maybe we'll start to see some clues that help us understand what's really going on.
I hope so, because this is fascinating stuff.
Okay.
Okay, so we've talked about cases in the US and other parts of the world, but the podcast also mentions some interesting encounters from China and Russia, right?
They do. They highlight a couple of cases that were widely reported at the time and that really captured the public imagination in those countries.
Like what?
Well, one is the Harbin UFO incident, which happened in China in 1994.
Harbin, where's that?
It's a city in northeastern China. And in 1994, multiple witnesses there reported seeing a large disc-shaped UFO hovering overhead.
A classic flying saucer.
Exactly. And some people even claim to have seen humanoid figures inside the craft.
So even in a country with a different cultural context and history, we're still seeing those classic UFO shapes and alien figures.
It seems so. It suggests that there might be something universal about these experiences.
Maybe there are certain archetypes or patterns that transcend cultural boundaries.
It's an interesting idea. And then there's the Voronezh UFO landing, which happened in Russia in 1989.
Russia. Okay, what happened there?
Well, this one's pretty wild. Multiple witnesses, including children, reported seeing a UFO land in a park in the city of Voronezh.
A UFO landing in broad daylight. That's bold.
They described tall, humanoid beings with 3 eyes emerging from the craft, along with a small, robot-like entity.
3 eyes, okay, that's a new one. And a robot sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
It does, and one witness even claimed to have been temporarily paralyzed by the beings.
Paralyzed. Wow, that's scary. What do you think happened there?
It's hard to say for sure, but the incident was widely reported in the Soviet press at the time.
So it wasn't just some fringe story. It was considered a legitimate news event.
It was, and it remains one of the most famous UFO encounters in Russia.
I can see why. It's got all the elements of a great sci-fi story. The podcast also mentions a case that's been a source of speculation for over a century, the Tunguska event.
Ah, yes, the Tunguska event. It's a bit of a wild card because we don't know for sure if it was related to UFOs, but the mystery surrounding it has definitely fueled a lot of speculation.
Okay, so remind me what happened again.
In 1908, a massive explosion occurred in the remote Tunguska region of Siberia.
Siberia. That's a pretty remote place.
It is. And the explosion was incredibly powerful. It flattened over 800 square miles of forest.
800 square miles. That's bigger than some countries.
It was a huge event, and to this day, no one knows for sure what caused it.
So what are the theories?
The most widely accepted explanation is that it was caused by a meteor or comet exploding in the atmosphere.
Okay, that makes sense.
But because of the remote location and the lack of a clear impact crater, some people believe it might have been something else entirely.
Something else. Like what? Well, some theories suggest it might have been a UFO crash. An alien spaceship exploding in the Siberian wilderness.
That would be pretty epic.
It would. And some even suggest it might have been an alien weapon test.
Whoa, no, that's a scary thought.
It is. It makes you wonder what kind of technology would be capable of causing such a massive explosion.
It's mind-boggling to think about. But even if it was just a meteor, the Tunguska event is still a reminder of the incredible power of the universe.
Absolutely. It shows how even small objects from space can have a huge impact on our planet.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. From potential government cover-ups to mysterious artifacts to unexplained encounters all over the world. It's enough to make anyone believe in aliens.
It's definitely a lot to process.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to keep an open mind when exploring this topic.
Right. It's okay to be skeptical, but it's also important to be open to the possibility that there might be more to the universe than we currently understand.
Exactly. We might not have all the answers yet, but that's what makes the search for extraterrestrial life so exciting. It's the ultimate mystery, and it's one that I think will continue to fascinate humans for generations to come.
I agree. The quest to understand our place in the cosmos is one of the most fundamental human endeavors.
And it's one that I think will ultimately lead us to some pretty amazing discoveries.
I can't wait to see what the future holds.
Me neither. Okay, so let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll delve even deeper into the world of aliens and UFOs with more intriguing cases, mysterious theories, and mind-blowing possibilities.
Sounds good. I'm ready for more.
Me too. Stay tuned. It really does make you think, like, what if those who came before us, like way before us, were trying to explain things they saw but just didn't have the words for it, you know?
Right. Like, imagine trying to describe a spaceship to someone who's never even seen a car.
Exactly.
Yep.
They might come up with some pretty wild stories and metaphors.
And maybe those stories became our myths and legends.
It's a cool thought.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, like, what are we misinterpreting today? You know, maybe something that seems totally crazy to us now will make perfect sense to people in the future.
Right. Like, imagine trying to explain the internet to someone from 1,000 years ago.
They'd probably think it was magic.
Exactly. So maybe we're just not quite there yet in terms of understanding the universe and all its possibilities.
Maybe. And that brings us to the whole idea of government involvement in this stuff. Like, the podcast spends a lot of time talking about government cover-ups and conspiracy theories.
Yeah, that's a big part of the whole UFO phenomenon. The idea that governments might be hiding evidence of alien contact.
And it's not just like a fringe belief anymore. It seems like more and more people are starting to think that there might be something to it.
Right. Especially with all the recent news about UAPs and the government taking it more seriously.
Yeah, it definitely feels like something is shifting.
Yeah.
So where do we start with all this government conspiracy stuff?
Well, I think we have to start with the granddaddy of them all, the Roswell incident.
Roswell. Oh yeah, that's the big one. A crashed spaceship, alien bodies, a government cover-up. It's like the ultimate UFO story.
It is. And it's been the subject of countless books, documentaries, and investigations for decades.
So remind me again what happened.
Okay, so back in 1947, the U.S. military reported recovering a flying disc near Roswell, New Mexico. But then they quickly changed their story, claiming it was just a weather balloon.
Classic cover-up move.
Right? It does seem suspicious. And of course, a lot of people didn't buy the weather balloon explanation. They believed that the government had actually recovered an alien craft and bodies and that they were covering it up.
It's hard to know what to believe, especially after all these years. But it's definitely a compelling story.
It is, and it raises a lot of questions about why the government would be so quick to change their story and why they've been so secretive about the whole thing ever since.
Right, like what are they hiding? And why?
Those are the million-dollar questions. And the podcast actually delves into some possible answers. They think that if people knew for sure that aliens existed, it would cause widespread chaos and disruption.
Yeah, I could see that happening. People might freak out.
Right. Or maybe they're worried about national security. They might be concerned that other countries could get their hands on alien technology and use it against us.
So they're trying to keep it under wraps to protect us.
That's one possibility. But some people believe that the government's motives are more sinister.
More sinister? Like what?
Well, some conspiracy theories suggest that the government might be working with aliens in secret, maybe even making deals with them.
Like some kind of shady alliance.
Right. And they might be covering up the truth because they don't want people to know about these deals.
Wow, that's getting pretty deep into conspiracy theory territory. But it's definitely interesting to think about.
It is. It makes you wonder what's really going on behind the scenes.
So besides Roswell, what other evidence of government cover-ups is there?
Well, the podcast mentions Project Blue Book, which was the U.S. Air Force's official UFO investigation from 1952 to 1969.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that. They investigated thousands of UFO sightings, right?
They did. But in the end, they concluded that most of them had conventional explanations, like weather phenomena or misidentified aircraft.
But a lot of people believe that Project Blue Book was just a cover-up itself.
Right. Some people think that it was a way for the government to debunk genuine sightings and to control the narrative about UFOs.
So they were trying to make it seem like there was nothing to see here, move along.
Exactly. But of course, that just made some people even more suspicious.
It's like the more you try to suppress something, the more people want to know about it.
Right. And that brings us to the disclosure movement.
Disclosure. Like people wanting the government to reveal the truth about UFOs.
Exactly. The disclosure movement is made up of individuals and groups who believe that the government is hiding evidence of alien contact and that they should come clean and tell the public what they know.
I mean, it makes sense, right? If they have proof of aliens, they should just share it with everyone.
That's what the disclosure movement argues. But of course, it's more complicated than that. There might be legitimate reasons why the government would want to keep certain information secret.
Like national security or something.
Right. Or maybe they're worried about the social and economic implications of revealing such a huge secret.
I can see that. It would definitely change the world as we know it.
Absolutely. It would be a paradigm shift.
Okay, so what about this alien technology that people keep talking about? Is there any truth to that?
Well, the podcast dives into the idea of crash retrievals and reverse engineering.
So the government is recovering crashed UFOs and trying to figure out how they work.
That's the theory. And they mention a few alleged crash sites besides Roswell.
Like what?
Well, one is Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, where in 1965, a metallic acorn-shaped object reportedly crashed.
An acorn-shaped UFO. That's interesting.
Right. And then there's Aurora, Texas, which we discussed earlier, where that mysterious airship crashed in 1897.
And with the alien pilot.
Exactly. So those are just a couple of examples. And then there are people who claim to have actually worked on reverse engineering alien technology.
Really? Like who?
Well, the podcast mentions Bob Lazar, who claimed to have worked at Area 51 back in the 1980s.
Area 51, the legendary secret base in Nevada.
That's right. And Lazar said that he was involved in reverse engineering alien spacecraft there. He even described advanced propulsion systems and a mysterious element called 115 as a potential power source.
Element 115, that sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
It does, and Lazar's claims are very controversial. There's no real evidence to support them, and a lot of people think he's just making it all up.
But his story definitely adds to the mystique of Area 51.
It does. It's become a symbol of government secrecy and the possibility of hidden alien technology.
What about other people who claim to have worked on this stuff?
The podcast also mentions Philip Corso, who wrote a book called The Day After Roswell, where he claimed that various modern technologies like fiber optics, lasers, and microchips were actually derived from alien artifacts recovered at Roswell.
So our smartphones might be powered by alien tech. That's kind of mind-blowing.
It is, but like Lazar's claims, Corso's story is based on anecdotal evidence and lacks any real scientific proof.
So it's hard to know what to believe, but it's definitely a fun thought.
It is. It makes you wonder what other secrets might be hidden in plain sight.
Okay, so what about these black budget programs that people keep talking about?
Right. Those are rumored government programs that are supposedly funded through hidden allocations, making them virtually untraceable and unaccountable.
So secret programs with secret funding. That sounds pretty shady.
It does, and it feeds into the whole conspiracy theory that the government is hiding something big from the public.
What are these programs supposed to be doing?
There are a lot of theories. Some people believe they're involved in researching UFOs and alien technology. Others think they're trying to develop advanced weapons based on alien designs.
So it's like a secret space race, but with aliens instead of the Soviets.
Exactly. And some even believe that these programs might be involved in making contact with aliens or even working with them in some capacity.
Okay, now that's getting really out there.
It is. But the thing about black budget programs is that they're so secretive by nature that it's almost impossible to know for sure what they're doing.
So it's all speculation.
For the most part, yes. But the fact that these programs are even rumored to exist shows how deeply ingrained the idea of government secrecy is in the whole UFO phenomenon.
It's like people believe that there's this whole other level of reality going on behind the scenes that the government is trying to keep hidden from us.
And maybe there is, but without more evidence, it's impossible to say for sure.
Okay, so we've covered government cover-ups, crash retrievals, black budget programs. What else is there?
Well, the podcast also talks about the Men in Black.
The Men in Black? Oh yeah, those mysterious figures who show up to silence UFO witnesses.
Exactly. They're like the boogeymen of the UFO world.
I've always been fascinated by them. Where did this whole Men in Black myth come from?
It can be traced back to the 1950s with accounts like Albert K. Bender, a UFO researcher who claimed that 3 men in black suits threatened him and told him to stop his investigations.
So they were trying to intimidate him into silence.
It seems so. And later, UFO researcher Gray Barker popularized the Men in Black myth in his book. They knew too much about flying saucers.
So from spooky encounters to books, the Men in Black legend was born.
Exactly. And over the years, the myth has grown and evolved. There are now countless stories about the Men in Black showing up at people's homes, confiscating evidence, and even erasing memories.
It's like they're the government's secret weapon for keeping the truth about UFOs hidden.
And what's interesting is that there are different theories about who the Men in Black actually are.
Like what?
Well, some people believe they're just government agents enforcing secrecy, but others think they might be something else entirely.
Something else. Like what?
Some theories suggest that the Men in Black might be aliens themselves disguised as humans.
Whoa, that's a creepy thought.
Or maybe they're interdimensional beings or some other type of non-human entity.
So they're not even from our reality.
That's one possibility. The podcast points out that there are a lot of strange and unexplained details in Men in Black encounters that don't fit with the typical government agent explanation.
Like what?
Well, witnesses often describe them as having unusual physical characteristics, like pale skin, oddly shaped heads, or piercing eyes.
So they're not your average G-men.
Right, and they often behave in strange ways, too, like they might speak in a monotone voice or move in an unnatural way.
So they're like uncanny valley versions of humans.
Exactly. And some witnesses even report that the Men in Black seem to have some kind of psychic abilities or advanced technology.
Well, maybe they are aliens or something else entirely.
It's definitely a possibility. But regardless of their true nature, the Men in Black continue to be a source of fascination and mystery.
They're like the ultimate embodiment of the unknown.
Exactly. They represent everything that's intriguing and unsettling about the UFO phenomenon.
And the fact that we still don't know for sure who they are or what they want just adds to the mystery.
It does. It keeps us guessing and keeps us searching for answers.
Okay, so we've covered government cover-ups, crash retrievals, black budget programs, Men in Black. What else is there?
Well, let's not forget about the UFO crafts themselves, the spaceships.
Oh, yeah, the spaceships.
Mm.
Those are a big part of the whole alien mythos.
They are. And what's interesting is that certain types of UFOs are often linked to specific alien races.
So it's like they have their own fleet of vehicles.
Exactly. Like, for example, the classic disc-shaped craft, often called flying saucers, those are often associated with the Greys.
The Greys.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's the classic image of a UFO.
Right. And one of the most famous examples of a disc-shaped UFO is, of course, the one that allegedly crashed at Roswell.
Roswell. Always coming back to Roswell.
It's the gift that keeps on giving for UFO enthusiasts.
What other shapes are there?
Well, there are cigar-shaped crafts, which are long and cylindrical.
Like a giant cigar in the sky.
Exactly. And these are sometimes described as motherships that carry smaller craft.
So they're like the aircraft carriers of the alien fleet.
Right. And these cigar-shaped UFOs are often associated with the Nordics or even the reptilians.
So maybe they're the ones behind those mass sightings where people report seeing huge cigar-shaped objects in the sky.
It's a possibility. And then there are triangular-shaped craft, which have become increasingly popular in UFO lore in recent years.
Triangular UFOs. I've heard of those. What are they like?
They're described as delta-shaped, often with lights at each corner, and they're known for their silent, high-speed flight.
Silent and fast. That sounds pretty stealthy.
It does, and they're often associated with the Greys or the reptilians, depending on the account.
So the triangle-shaped UFO could be either a sign of advanced alien technology or a harbinger of a reptilian invasion.
It's all about perspective, I guess. What other shapes are there?
Well, the podcast mentions a few more. There are egg-shaped or ovoid craft, which are often linked to the Greys or other humanoid aliens. So basically like a giant egg floating through space.
Right, and then there are spheres or orbs, which are often associated with energy beings or non-physical entities.
So those might be the ones that people report seeing as glowing balls of light.
Exactly. And then there are the more recent tic-tac-shaped craft, which gained notoriety after the Nimitz UFO incident, where U.S. Navy pilots encountered one off the coast of California.
A tic-tac UFO. That's
Yeah.
a new one. What was that all about?
Well, in 2004, 2 Navy pilots reported seeing this strange object that was shaped like a tic-tac candy. It was white and oblong, and it was moving in ways that defied the laws of physics.
Like how?
It was making sudden stops and turns, and it was accelerating at incredible speeds.
So it was like some kind of super advanced aircraft.
It seemed that way. And the pilots couldn't explain what they saw.
Wow, that's pretty freaky. It makes you wonder what we're up against.
It does. It challenges our understanding of technology and what's possible.
Okay, so we've got saucers, cigars, triangles, eggs, orbs, tic-tacs. Is there anything else?
Well, the podcast mentions a few more unusual shapes, like chevron-shaped craft, which are V-shaped and often associated with mass sightings. And then there are the really weird ones like boomerang-shaped craft and cylindrical craft with domes on top.
So basically any shape you can imagine.
Pretty much. And it makes you wonder if there's a reason for all this variety in UFO shapes.
Like maybe different alien races have different preferences when it comes to spaceship design.
Or maybe the shape of the craft is somehow related to its function or its propulsion system.
Right, like maybe the triangle-shaped ones are designed for stealth and speed, while the disc-shaped ones are better for hovering and observing.
It's an interesting thought. And it shows how even something as simple as the shape of a UFO can be a source of mystery and speculation.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. From government cover-ups, to strange encounters, to mysterious artifacts, to the spaceships themselves. It's enough to make your head spin.
It's definitely a lot to take in, and it's important to remember that a lot of this is speculation and theory. There's no definitive proof of any of it.
Right, but that's part of the fun. It's about exploring the possibilities and asking questions and trying to understand something that's bigger than ourselves.
I agree. It's about pushing the boundaries of our knowledge and our imagination.
And maybe someday we'll find those answers.
I hope so, because
Yeah.
the universe is a vast and mysterious place, and I think there's still so much out there that we don't know.
That's for sure. And I'm excited to keep exploring it.
Me too. Now, the podcast episode we've been using as our guide ends with a discussion of something that's always captured people's imaginations: the search for alien artifacts.
Alien artifacts. So we're talking about physical objects that might prove that aliens have visited Earth.
Exactly. And there are actually quite a few alleged alien artifacts out there, some more credible than others.
Like, what are some of the most famous examples?
Well, of course, there's the Roswell debris, which we've already talked about.
Roswell again. It always comes back to Roswell.
It's the granddaddy of all alien conspiracies, what can I say? But the podcast also mentions some other interesting cases.
Good question.
Well, one is the Betz Mystery Sphere, which was found by a family in Florida back in 1974.
Okay, I've never heard of that. What is it?
It was this metallic sphere about the size of a bowling ball, and it had some really strange properties.
Like what?
Well, for one thing, it was incredibly heavy, much heavier than it should have been for its size. And it also seemed to react to sound and light.
Really? So it was like some kind of alien tech?
That's what some people believed. And it gets even weirder.
Wow.
The family claimed that the sphere would sometimes roll around on its own as if it were being controlled by some unseen force.
Whoa, that's creepy.
It is. And they also said that it would emit humming sounds and vibrate.
So it was like it was alive or something?
It definitely had some unusual properties. And of course, this all sparked a lot of speculation about its origins.
So what happened to the sphere?
Well, the family allowed scientists in the military to examine it, but they never came up with a definitive explanation for what it was. And then one day, the sphere just disappeared.
It vanished.
Yep, gone without a trace.
Wow, that's a real mystery. What about other artifacts?
Well, there's the Coso artifact, which was found in California in 1961.
What's up?
It was a geode, a rock with a hollow cavity inside. And inside the cavity, they found what looked like a spark plug.
Spark plug? Like for a car?
Exactly. It was a small ceramic cylinder with a metal rod in the middle, and it looked very similar to a modern-day spark plug.
But this was found in a rock that was supposedly millions of years old.
Right, which suggests that it might have been created by some advanced civilization that predates humans.
So maybe it's proof of ancient aliens.
It's a possibility, but like the Betz Mystery Sphere, the Coso artifact eventually disappeared.
Another vanishing artifact. Like they're teasing us with these glimpses of something extraordinary, but then they just vanish into thin air.
And it makes you wonder if there's some force out there that's trying to keep these artifacts hidden from us.
Or maybe they just got lost or misplaced or something.
Maybe. But it definitely adds to the mystery.
It does. Okay, so those are just a couple of examples, but there are many other alleged alien artifacts out there.
Right. The podcast mentions a few others, like the Dropastones, which are said to be ancient discs inscribed with stories of alien visitors.
Dropastones, I've heard of those. Where were they found?
In China, they were supposedly discovered in a cave in the 1930s. And they're covered in these strange symbols that no one has been able to decipher.
Wow, so it's like an alien Rosetta Stone.
Exactly. And then there's the Antikythera mechanism, which is an ancient Greek device that's often called the world's first computer.
The first computer, what did it do?
It was used to track the movements of the stars and planets, and it's incredibly complex for its time. It's made up of gears and dials, and it's so sophisticated that some people believe it might have been inspired by alien technology.
So maybe the ancient Greeks were getting tech support from ET.
It's a fun thought. And there are many other objects that have sparked speculation about their possible alien origins.
Like what?
Well, the podcast mentions a few more, like the London hammer, which is a hammer that was found embedded in a rock formation that's supposedly millions of years old.
So it's like a hammer from the time of the dinosaurs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's the Voynich manuscript, which is a book written in an unknown language and filled with strange illustrations.
The Voynich manuscript. Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah.
It's like the ultimate unbreakable code.
It is. And some people believe it might be a message from aliens.
Or maybe it's just a hoax.
That's always a possibility. But that's part of the challenge with these alleged alien artifacts. It's often hard to distinguish genuine evidence from hoaxes and forgeries.
But it's still fun to speculate.
Definitely. And it's exciting to think that somewhere out there might be a physical object that could prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that we're not alone in the universe.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from scientific inquiry to unexplained phenomena to government cover-ups to mysterious artifacts to the spaceships themselves. It's been a wild ride.
It has. And I think it's safe to say that the alien question is one that will continue to fascinate and intrigue us for a long time to come.
I agree. And who knows, maybe someday we'll finally get those definitive answers that we're all searching for.
I hope so. But until then, the mystery continues.
Yeah, it really does make you wonder what's out there and if maybe we'll ever find out for sure.
And what it all means, you know? Like, what does it say about us and our place in the universe if there is other life out there?
Right. Like, are we special? Or are we just one of countless civilizations scattered across the cosmos?
It's a humbling thought, for sure. And it makes you realize how much we still don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what makes this whole topic so fascinating. It's the mystery, the unknown, the possibility that anything could be out there.
Absolutely. It's like we're constantly pushing the boundaries of our knowledge and our understanding of reality.
And with every new discovery, every new encounter, every new piece of evidence, that boundary gets pushed a little further.
And who knows, maybe someday we'll reach a point where we finally have a clear understanding of our place in the universe and whether or not we're alone.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But until then, I think it's important to keep an open mind and to keep asking questions.
I agree. Curiosity is what drives us to explore and to discover.
And sometimes, even if we don't find the answers we're looking for, the journey itself can be just as rewarding.
I think that's a really important point. We might not have all the answers about aliens and UFOs, but the search itself has led to some pretty amazing scientific and technological advancements.
Absolutely. And it's also pushed us to think differently about ourselves and our place in the cosmos.
It's challenged our assumptions and expanded our horizons.
And I think that's ultimately a good thing.
Right.
Even if we never find definitive proof of alien life, the very act of searching has enriched our understanding of the universe and of ourselves.
Well said. I think that's a perfect note to end on.
Yeah, I think so too. So thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of aliens and UFOs.
It's been a pleasure.
And remember, keep looking up at the stars. You never know what you might see.
And keep those questions coming. The search for truth never ends.